I know some of you are still copying your stuff, so what I'd like to do is go over some notes first, and then by the time we're done with notes, those of you that were copying your XAMPP files over and weren't running yet, I'll make sure you're running good. Then we'll go right into the other download that I put on our website. If you go to lessons in our course conference, and then go to course documents, there is a link here that says Notepad++ Portable. These are only for folks using Windows machines, okay? If you're using Mac, Text Wrangler is what you'll be using. But this download on Windows is a portable version of Notepad++ that you can put on the root of your USB drive, okay? It goes to the root of your USB drive and downloads. You download it. When you install it, when it asks you for a path where to put this program, you want to put it to the path of your USB drive. And so if you want to go ahead and download that, Notepad++, go ahead and download it, install it, and when it prompts you to install it to a directory, install it to the root directory of your USB drive, okay? When the installation's finished, it'll prompt you, do you want to run it now? Go ahead and say yes, you want to run it now, because we're going to actually use Notepad++ in here to do our coding and development in PHP, okay? And then once you guys leave tonight, you're going to have a working copy of XAMPP running, because we went over it one by one in here. You'll have a portable copy of Notepad++ that you can develop from. And so literally any Windows machine you go to, you can plug in your USB drive, fire up XAMPP, hit the MySQL Apache, fire up Notepad++ to begin doing your development and code, okay? So everything will literally be, all your apps will literally be contained on the USB drive. Now I mentioned this last week, and I'll mention it again, make sure when you guys get home tonight, back up that USB drive. Right-click on that file, compress it, and store it on your computer. At least do that. It'd probably be best to probably put it on a DVD or CD-ROM to burn it onto a CD-ROM or DVD drive, just to have it external somewhere. That way if your computer crashes and you lose the contents of your USB drive, you've still got the data, that all the stuff you've been working on. And I would suggest doing what I just told you maybe once a week. To burn a copy of whatever to a CD or DVD drive literally is about 10 cents. To buy a CD or DVD, RW, whatever drive you have to burn. Most of you, I'm guessing, have DVD drives that you can burn to on your computer that you never use anyway. So you can use it for this purpose. Have a backup archive copy of your XAMPP installation each week, just to be on the safe side. And so by the end of the semester, you might have 13 CDs, and you can label them and everything, or DVDs of each week's archive. Make sense? It won't take just a minute to do that. So it'll help you tremendously, because I can't tell you over the last 7 years I've taught this class how many times students have, the USB drives gotten lost, it's been destroyed, they didn't have a backup, they start all over again for the install, all of their code, everything. So you don't want to do that, okay? So let's go ahead and start with the notes real quick. For lesson week 2, while everybody's still copying your stuff down and you're installing that Notepad++. So the first note we're going to go over is the one basic PDF in the practice lab. The example for this one is this right here we'll be doing in just a second. Chuck Conkle is 301 in dog years. We'll be doing that in PHP in just a second. And then there's the source code. And I mentioned this last week. Each week has the example of the final example for that lab, and also for the homework. Homework has the same thing, has an example link. Both the lab and the homework also have a full source code to download to check off against your code. All right, so you're not in the dark on what your code should look like at all, ever. You have the complete source code from beginning to end for both the lab and also for the homework. So let's go ahead and go over the PDF first for the one PDF for the lab, just PHP Basics. So what is PHP? I'm glad you asked. It's a scripting language that is commonly used on web servers. It stands for PHP Hypertext Preprocessor. So it takes a letter P from PHP, H from hypertext, and preprocessor to make PHP. It is open source, and what that means is it's free. It doesn't cost anything for you to use PHP, to download Apache, and to use MySQL, and even to use XAMPP. How do they make money? Companies who develop in this platform get hired to develop websites, so the developers get paid to do this. So even though the platform is free, you can make a living developing in PHP as a web developer or as a web consultant, okay? The code is constantly being updated, and what I mean by code is Apache itself is constantly being updated, made better. At least 1 or 2 versions are updated a year. The issues with that, though, just so you know, I've been developing in this platform for about 15 years now, is with each release of PHP, there are old code you have that might no longer work on the new version of PHP. So there are some dangers on just updating to the newest version of PHP just because it's out there, all right? And I guess that kind of goes with anything with Windows or anything with development. Never update any version just because it's out there, whether it be a Windows update, whether it be a software update. If that software is running just fine in your development environment, leave it alone. Does that make sense? Because I have seen updates totally destroy millions of lines of code because of whatever was in that update no longer makes that code work. And so, does that make sense? And so, just that'll save you maybe weeks or months or years of headaches, just that little tidbit alone. Now, I'm not talking about security updates on Windows. Those are definitely important. But I've even seen updates on Windows and even on the Mac OS that has caused issues. And so be real leery on just pushing out automatic updates on any system, specifically if that system is a development system, all right? There's a difference between development systems and production systems. Developers have systems that they develop with, so whether it be your laptop at home, your desktop at home. So on those machines that you're developing on, you want to make sure you keep antivirus updated for sure. Do not be installing all different types of applications on that machine. Keep it pretty clean and lean, and don't do a lot of web browsing on it. You're mainly going to use it for development. Okay, what I mean by web browsing is don't play like online games, go to any peer-to-peer sites, things of that nature, because that can destroy your computer and your development platform quicker than anything. All right? And so it's open source. Other developers constantly are updating PHP. It's embedded code. And what that means is, we showed you a little example of this last week. When you create, like this first app we're going to create tonight on the Dog Ears app, when you create the app in PHP and then run it in your web browser and then view the source of that code, all you're going to see is HTML code. You're not going to see the PHP code. It's going to be embedded in the server itself. In this case, it's the Apache server that's running off of XAMPP right now on your machines, okay? Because we talked about last week, there's 2 types of development platform. You've got client side and you've got server side. Server side is what we're using here in this class, meaning all the code resides on the server and stays on the server. It's embedded in the server. The viewers or the users cannot see that code. They only see the rendering of the HTML that's rendered when they view that page. Okay, you don't type in the HTML it creates. The browser creates that HTML, all right, from that preprocessed file. It's comparable with ASP, which is an older platform of development. It can run on multiple operating systems and web servers. So I have this running on Mac, a Mac server at home. So the client that we see all of our examples on our class, I literally have that on a server at home. It's on a Mac server that runs all this website for this. It's literally been running for 7 years now, the same server. I update content, things of that nature, but I pretty much leave it alone. I don't do productivity stuff on that machine. It can also run on Windows servers as well. If you were to ask me what platform, and even Linux, thirdly, what platform is PHP server-side generally ran on? Linux would be the #1 platform it's ran on, a Linux server, which again, I have some units or places that have Linux servers for PHP. And Linux servers are servers that you install Apache, install MySQL. It runs the web server for the website, but you literally have no monitor or mouse or keyboard plugged into it. It sits in a corner or on a shelf in a business, and it runs for years. You never have to worry about it. There's no updates. You don't have to worry about antivirus. There's no viruses that hit Linux machines. And so it's the #1 server for what we're learning this semester would be a Linux server. And again, I have a number of installs that have a Linux server as the host. But for development purpose that you guys are learning, XAMPP is perfect. It's a perfect platform to learn development platform because you can take that USB drive anywhere that has a Windows computer. If you're a Mac person, you can take it on your, like I do here on my laptop anywhere I go, and it's portable, and you can take it anywhere. And it's a perfect platform for development. It's not production. XAMPP is not production platform, but it's perfect for development. All right. And just so you know, the Web290 class that I have running at home is ran off of XAMPP completely. That whole server is running off of XAMPP right now on my Mac. So it can run production, but it's not really designed to do that. They have other softwares, like for instance, you can run and install Apache totally separate. There's an Apache install for all clients, whether it be Linux, Windows, or Mac. Mac already has a built-in Apache install if you want to turn it on. Windows does not. You do have to download and install that. Linux does have a built-in Apache install that you just have to turn on as well. So Linux and Mac are probably the two platforms that already have Apache pre-installed on the OS. MySQL is a free download for Windows, Mac, or Linux that you can also download and install separately. And so with both of those installs, you can have a web server up and running. But you can, for our purpose, and for even smaller businesses, I have used XAMPP for small websites, and it works fine, okay? Because you do have a full version of Apache running, and you have a full version of MySQL running. Apache is the platform in PHP that PHP runs upon. Without Apache running, you're not going to be able to see the code rendered server side. It would just basically, when you typed in the PHP file in your web browser, you would just see the code you just typed in. That's all you would see. You wouldn't see it rendered as HTML. Yes?
So Apache is a web server.
It's a web server, yes.
I think
IIS is a Windows server. Windows only. PHP will not run on that, no. Now, 2S server on Windows platform will run ASP.NET, okay? But it will not run PHP. All right, that's a good question because there is differences. You can only run PHP on Apache. All right. ASP can be run on both Linux platform or Apache and Windows both. It can run on both. But PHP can only run on, there's different flavors of both, but there's not much development done on ASP anymore. But it was started, the roots of that was started on Windows development. ASP was. Now they just added the .NET because that's a new version of Windows platform. So that's the second, what is PHP? There's some resources that are definitely worth bookmarking if you've not already done this and went through this, is php.net and then rocks.com. php.net is just a web page that gives you total resources with PHP, code, examples, tutorials, other text and forums are out there. So what can PHP do? PHP is a dynamic generation of a web page content. What that means is, and you'll learn it this semester, you can do what's called importing modules into a page and show up on that page whenever you want it to show up. Unlike any other development platform, PHP is probably the most modular-based development. What that means is I could have everybody in here developing a separate module. And to make it simpler for you, you could say we're a gaming company, and each one of you are creating a separate game module, okay, in PHP. You guys give me your PHP module that runs by itself just fine. I can take those modules and import them into one PHP file and run them anywhere I want to on that page with one line of code pointed to your PHP file. So that's unlike any other. Dynamic is really the key to PHP. And you'll actually see what that infers when you guys do it here in a few weeks when you begin importing external PHP pages. Database interaction, we work with MySQL in here. PHP can also work with SQL as well, but you'll find most PHP websites build upon MySQL. PHP can also process user-supplied data. What that means is a user fills a form out, they hit submit, it takes that form to another page in the website that says, hey, thank you, Chuck, thank you for filling this form out, and it has some information at the bottom, and maybe it also sends me a link in my email to confirm that I just filled that form out. And so it can process user-supplied data easily. We'll learn this semester PHP can also send emails. And I do this a lot in my PHP programming. For development, when I'm debugging the code, what that means is cleaning up the code to see if there's any errors. I can put in multiple places in PHP, try catches, and what that means is I can try a function of code. If it errors out, it'll send me an email with the exact error, what line it was found, and what file it was found on. So internally, developers can use emails for their benefit during the debugging process of development. Also, email can be used for email. And so when a user fills a form out, it emails a content of that form to someone in the company immediately. And it also saves the content of that form to a MySQL database. Does that make sense? And so it can do that as well in PHP. And so file handling, PHP can upload files, create folders. It can delete files, create folders. Anything file handling you can do locally on a Windows or Mac machine, you can do in a PHP environment. And so if you had a gallery for photos, right, and you let users log into that gallery and upload images from their local machine to your web server, that's file handling because it's uploading a picture, putting it in a SQL database where that picture is located on the server, and showing it on the web page. It's doing all that with file handling built into PHP. Text processing, it can process text just fine. So like embedded word processing modules, you can basically build a mini notepad or WordPad type of document file structure in PHP and it's popular in CMS sites. What CMS sites are is basically production sites that everybody in the department has rights to a certain page, and it looks like a little text box that they can type in, and it has bolding and underlining and hyperlink and inserting pictures area. So just kind of like a mini Word document inside of a website It lets you do that using text processing in PHP. Network interaction. PHP works well with networks, both internet and local networks. So you can code a PHP program to work with a local business network and file mappings and folder mappings just fine. Okay? And much more you'll learn. Fundamentals, though, let's get to that. Did we get the Notepad++ installed? How's that going? Is it up in front of you? Anybody having issues? Yes.
Well, I have Text Wrangler. Do I need to upload the Notepad to transfer them?
If you're going to use Windows in here, which you are, right? And I think I've already installed on that USB drive I gave you. Notepad++ is already on. You can copy everything on there after class. Yeah, that'd be fine. Yeah, that'd be fine. But if you want to go ahead and fire that Notepad++ that's on the USB drive, my USB drive, and go ahead and get it running because we're going to use it. So Notepad++ we're going to use to begin typing some code here in a second. And one of the things I want to mention before we get into coding at all is some file structure that I've already went over a little bit last week, and it's in your documents and the podcast I've already done. But let's talk about the file structure of your XAMPP folder. Okay, you've all seen the htdocs folder, right? In the root of your XAMPP folder, there's an htdocs folder. What this folder is it is any document you save in here is viewable on your website, okay? On your website, all right? So right now in htdocs, I think there's a XAMPP folder, there's maybe a Web290 folder you have if you copied that template from last week, and maybe that's it, okay? And there's some other files below. These are folders, okay? And we'll say for this file here we're getting ready to do, we'll name it index.php in just a second. Don't do it right now. And we'll save it in the root of Web290. In fact, we'll be a little fancier here. We might actually make sure there's a labs folder in there, and then we'll do week 1. And then from here is where we'll put in the index.php file. So in order, when you type in localhost in your web browser, like I've had you do tonight, XAMPP already has a index file in the root of htdocs that basically redirects to that XAMPP folder, okay? But if you were just to type in localhost and then type in, Web290, and that's it, if there was no other index files in here, no other index.html or index.php or default.php or default.html, it's going to show you all the directories you have in that Web290 folder and all the files you have in there that are not index.php or default.php. Now the reason it shows you the directories in PHP is just kind of like in Windows. If you go into My Computer and go into your folders, you know how you can see all your subfolders and all the files in those subfolders? The same thing in PHP. The difference is these two files here. Index would be one. And we'll just use these two examples, index.php and index.html. Okay, somebody tell me what these two files are used for in the root of a website. Those of you who've done any web development before, what are generally these files used for in a root of a website?
It's like your homepage.
Right, exactly, it's your homepage. And so if you do not have these two file names in the root of any folder, you will see a directory structure. If you don't have these file names, which is the home name of that page or of PHP or HTML, it'll show you that index page, HTML or index PHP, whichever one it is. So an easy way for developers to kind of browse your developing platform, now granted you wouldn't want this on production site, but we're doing it in development, is if you just browse out to localhost and type in localhost, type in Web290, hit enter, it'll show you all your folders. For instance, it'll show you maybe something like, Maybe it'll show you labs, and maybe it'll show you homework. And these are two subfolders. And then if you were to type, if you were to click on labs, then it would show you week 1, week 2, so on and so forth in your platform. Now, so all you have to make sure is when you're saving files for practice, what I suggest is, and this is what I do on my development platform, is you can, in localhost, I always suggest students in here just, if you don't already have a folder in the root of htdocs called Web290, create one. And then inside of the Web290, you can create a folder called test. And what you're going to do in there is just put all of your test files and folders in there all the time. Test is your playground, basically, to put stuff in while you're playing around. When you get it kind of close to what you want, you can basically copy that file and put it into the correct folder in your lab or in your homework. Does that make sense? Because each week you've got lab and homework, and so the structure for your homework is going to be, instead of labs, it'll be in maybe homework or projects, whatever you want to call it. I think that download I gave you guys last week said projects or something. It doesn't have to be that. It's just, my way of helping you get started. And then each one of these would have subfolders for your week 1, week 2, so on and so forth. Make sense? So if you go ahead and create all of those folders, what I mean by that is, I know for sure for labs and homework both, you're going to need up to at least 12 folders, weeks 1 through week 12, and you'll need a final folder inside of your homework, okay, or projects, whatever you want to call it, okay. This folder here, the homework folder, is the folder that you're going to be uploading to your external site only, and that's the one that you'll be graded on, is your homework folder. The lab folder is the one we'll be doing in here. You can do it before you come to class and go ahead and practice it and get it done, and get kind of a head start before you come in here. But we'll be doing it again from scratch in the classroom each week. That lab assignment will be, and you'll be keeping that on your USB drive. I will not be collecting it. I'll just come around to each one of your machines and see that it's working. But you won't be submitting that anywhere in a Dropbox and Eagle or uploading it anywhere. Does that make sense? And you'll basically get points for just being here doing that in-class lab. It's like 50 points a lab is what you'll be getting just to be here. Then the homework, a lot of times the initial part anyway we're doing in here, the initial few weeks, the homework's tons easier sometimes than the labs, or a little bit easier sometimes than the labs, and I do that on purpose. I want your labs to be just a tad bit harder code-wise, but very low stakes when it comes to grade-wise. And there's a reason for that. If it's a low stake grade or no grade, students there's no fear. There's no like, whew, okay, this is fun, I can do this. And when you struggle with something, you struggle with it. But you don't worry about it, you don't freak out about it, because there's not going to be a grade put on that, okay? But I have had students tell me, because I structure it that way, and again, as you get further in the semester, the homeworks do get a little harder, but I purposely make the labs, for the most part, a tad bit harder than the homework for that purpose, is so you don't freak out on the labs, but students have told me they get a lot out of the labs. Because again, it's a low stake thing. You can do over and over again. You can modify however you want to. You can tweak it. You can play with it. And it's yours to see. You're not uploading it anywhere. You're not submitting it to me. And so it's something that you actually build your skill set each week with the challenging labs. And like I said, the homeworks generally aren't as challenging for the most part, the first half of the semester anyway, to where you can get your feet wet in coding and developing and not freak out on the grade, because I don't want you to freak out on that, okay? As long as you hang in there and you turn in your homework each week, and if you have issues, you can come see me before class. You can stay after. I'll try to get everybody out of here by 9 each session to where I can help you. But if you do that, you're going to be fine. You're going to make a great grade in here. You're going to make an A and B, easy, okay? And most of you will make an A. So just you show up each Wednesday night and do the work, you'll be fine, okay? So let's talk about fundamentals. And PHP, embedded in PHP within HTML pages, has some tags. And it begins with the first tag, the first line. And if you have Notepad++ up, you can go ahead and type this in. It's a question mark, PHP, okay? Question mark, PHP. So lesser than symbol, question mark, PHP. So these three make up the beginning tag of a PHP code, PHP page, all right? If you hit enter in Notepad++ and come down to the bottom, so maybe do like maybe 4 or 5 enters in your page there, and go down to that last line and do this one, question mark greater than symbol, okay? When your browser sees these two tags, it knows it's a PHP file. Yes? Oh, too, it looks like you should have this button here, this zoom button. There you go. In the middle of your guys' screen at the top, there's a zoom button and a negative zoom button and a zoom in, zoom out button. You can do that. That'll blow it up. Looks like that's better. Yeah, so right in the middle of your screen, there's a zoom in, zoom out. Looks like a magnifying glass. That looks like that might be easier if you can't do the control click thing. So everybody get the PHP code in? These two lines? All right. And basically, if you're wanting PHP on one line, which we'll actually do this semester some weeks, where we just want to embed PHP inside of some HTML, you can do it that way on the second bullet. Now, each line of PHP is terminated, like MySQL, with a semicolon. If you've taken C++, you're familiar with this type of syntax on ending code and termination of code. So what I'd like you to do is go ahead and type in this bit of code for your very first app in here, and go ahead and do the whole thing. Now you'll notice you're going to have to change some things around from what I already had you type in. Your PHP is going to actually be on one line of code right here, but go ahead and replace everything on that Notepad++ with what's on the overhead, and save this entire file as index.php. And what we'll do is we'll go ahead, if you don't already have the file structure, let me write the file structure I recommend you saving this in on your USB drive. Let me write it up here on the board. So htdocs, and inside of htdocs, I want you to put a folder. We're going to call it Web290 if you don't already have it. And then we'll do labs. Week 1. And then the name of the file you're typing in right now, you're going to save it as index.php. So Web290, labs, week 1, index.php. So before you save this, go ahead and go into the root of your htdocs and make sure these folders exist. Web290 in the root of htdocs, labs in the root of Web290, and week 1 in the root of labs before you try to save it into week 1. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, how we doing? We get a save there? Okay. Yeah, type in localhost and make sure and type in Web290. Yeah. Let's see how you saved it. Week 1.
Oh, I guess it don't have. Oh, okay. I guess the file structure in here isn't updated, so.
Yeah, that's fine. You just have to manually type it in then. Manually type in, what is after Web290, you're going to type in labs, right? Something's not right on your pathing. So let me look here. htdocs, Web290, labs, week 1. You need week 1 after labs, right? And you shouldn't have to need it. You shouldn't need index.php. It should automatically recognize that. Caps and a W on week 1. It's syntax oriented. Web290 labs. Week 1, yeah, you have to put a space in between the week. There you go. Let's go to your directory for me again. htdocs, Web290, and then labs. Put your cursor right up here. Okay, highlight all of that back to Web290. Get rid of, yeah, Web290, copy that. Go into your web browser, type in localhost, and after localhost, paste, and redirect the slashes the other way. Did you have a www in front of it or something? No, you don't need htdocs. Yeah, let me get in there real quick. I can see what's going on. It's okay. Let's do the Web290 labs. All right, cool. There we go. Yep, you're good. Okay, so let me show you what you should see on your screen when you type in the path of your. Did I put my USB drive back here? Okay. And I'll come by and help you if you're having issues. Don't worry. Okay, so what you should see, if you look on the overhead real quick, let me show you my code first. Okay. Let me blow this up real quick so you can see it. Let me zoom in on this very quickly. Text property up a little bit more. Okay, so let's look at my lines of code first, and I'll go ahead and go from here all the way to saving it and showing it to you. Okay, so what am I highlighting here on this line right here? What am I highlighting on the overhead?
That's what I was gonna say.
The PHP directive for the beginning tag. Here's the echo command, which is going to echo to the screen. This is just basic HTML code in single quotes. It's going to be hello REC. There's my terminator line, question mark greater than symbols, the MPHP. Everything else you guys have done up to this point, if you've had any web development, is all HTML. Everything besides this line I've just highlighted. Now I'm going to go ahead and save this real quick to the directory I had you save on the board. Now if you look on the overhead, okay, I've got Web290, then I've got labs, week 1, and I name it index.php. To browse out to this, let me back up to Web290. That's my home page I made for it. If I go into labs, there we go. If I go into labs, there's my directories of all my labs on my USB drive or on my Mac. I'm going to go to week 1. There's my hello RVC. Now let's view the source file. Notice you do not see the PHP code. Instead, let me do it this way. You see HTML only. Let me minimize this. Okay, so that line of code 6, line code 6 right there, you'll notice the way it's rendered in the browser is it captures and wrote and echoed to my browser that hello RVC, but it did not echo or did not show and will not show the source of the PHP code. It's on the server side, on the Apache side, okay? And so if I was to change this text to hello class, save it, go back and re-render that page. All right? And so now it's echoed that new string, that new HTML string, hello class, to my browser. So the issues I saw some of you had is path names. Do not put any spaces in any folders. So don't do week space 1, do week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. Does that make sense? Shove it all together, no spaces. The other thing is make sure there's no spaces in the names of your files. And also make sure the names of your files are all lowercase. Okay? So index.php should all be lowercase. All right? That's going to help you just so, because on some browsers, you literally have to type in, like if I typed in, for instance, on some browsers, if I typed in W instead of lowercase w, it was uppercase W. It works here on Firefox, but some browsers it does not work. Like I know Netscape doesn't work, IE doesn't work on some versions. Has to be the exact syntax of that folder name. Firefox figures it out and lets you go there anyway. So anything that you create folder-wise or file-wise in PHP development, always make sure it's lowercase. Does that make sense? In your development plan. It'll just save you a lot of headache. Okay? So let me just walk around and see how you did on that. What I'd like to see as I walk around is your working page. This says hello world, or if you renamed it like mine to hello class, that's fine. I just want to see this working for you. And then we're going to do the dog ears. Good. Do what now? Oh, no, that's fine.
So, real quick though, week 1.
Yeah.
Look, it's, I don't know what you call that, but you know, it doesn't have like an icon, so like when I double click it, my file system thing.
It's not going to. Your Windows doesn't know what to do with PHP initially.
Oh, right, okay.
Now, when you first tie it to, you can right-click on that file, and you can associate it with Notepad++. If you go to Open With,
Oh, or I could watch this, I do know, run and then watch.
you can do it that way too.
I must have a mistake.
But you don't have your local host path. You have to have the local host path. Okay? So type in your local host path direct to that directory and you'll be fine. So localhost, Web290, labs, right? Now get rid of XAMPP. You don't need XAMPP and you don't need htdocs. So you're going to go and type in Web290. Okay, and then type in labs, hit enter after labs. And is that your file structure? Go to your folder. There you go. Cool. Now click on week 1, the week 1 folder. Just click on it. There we go. Now you got it. Cool. Good job.
My finger's working now too.
Okay, great, great. How we doing over here? Good. How we doing on this row? Any issues? Okay, you don't need htdocs.
I don't need
Do not need htdocs. No. You don't need htdocs when you guys do the local host. What I drew up on the board was the actual physical path on your computer or on your USB drive. htdocs is the actual root of your web server, so you don't type that in. Okay? You don't type it in. It's localhost, and then whatever's in the root of htdocs is what's going to be past the slash in localhost. So you should be localhost, Web290, labs, week 1, and that's it. Now, why don't I have to type in index.php on the end of week 1? It automatically recognizes that as a default page and goes to it. Okay, cool. So you're working? You're working? How are we doing over here? Okay, let's see your file directory.
I put it on the desktop.
Nope, it's got to be on the USB drive.
Oh. Okay, that's why. I thought I would copy it from the desktop to mine.
It's running off the USB drive right now, so it has to stay on the USB drive.
No, I didn't do the file structure on that thing.
Well, for right now, what we're going to do is save it direct to the root of htdocs
290.
and just save it.
Okay.
We'll take it back. Just let's put it in the root of Web290, labs.
Week 1.
Go ahead and type in week 1, all one word, lowercase. Okay, click open, the open button, and then click save. Okay, now go back to your web browser. It's just, there you go. And just do a refresh. Okay, there's a syntax error on line 6. Go back to your code. Just leave it right there. Go back to your code. Go to line 6. And what you're going to have to do is you're missing, retype your single quote, and your end quote is double quote. Should be single quote.
So just the last one.
Okay, after the semicolon, bring up the, in fact,
Did it again.
and then semicolon, and then bring up the PHP onto that same line.
Oh, break
The
it.
question mark PHP on the same line.
Oh, okay.
Question mark. There you go. Now get rid of the, go backspace 1. Okay. Save. Okay. And let's go ahead and refresh your web page now. There we go. How are we doing here? Okay, syntax error. You need to replace your single quotes. It looks like you copy and pasted from the PDF file probably. So replace that with the single quotes in Windows.
So I'll replace single to double?
No, single. Leave it single. But that's from the PDF file. It's going to give a funky single quote. So go ahead and just replace it with a single quote. Type in a single quote again. Get rid of that one. There you go. Replace the other one. Backspace. Put another single quote in. Yeah, so they're totally different single quotes. And then save it.
Save all, just save it.
Save all. Go back to your browser and see if you can load it. There we go. Okay, how are we doing here? Is yours working?
No.
No. Okay.
I can't. Yes.
All one line.
Oh, it's on the outside or the inside?
You want it on the outside of the PHP. So you want after the echo file, single quote, your HTML, and at the end, single quote.
Like that?
There you go. Now go ahead and save it and recompile it on the web browser.
It shows up here, but it doesn't work. There's the path to it.
Okay, let me get in there real quick. All right. Oh, you don't have the end title tag.
Oh. Yeah.
Okay, it's got some mist here. Let's see what we got. End tag, title tag, body, PP. And let's make sure XAMPP is running okay. And XAMPP portable is where it's running from. So that's an issue as well. Let's see here. We got that. XAMPP portable. Okay, good. Okay, we'll just leave it at that. Looks like you've got some syntax issues, but it's better than what it was.
There's supposed to be a space here between the question mark and PHP.
Yeah, there is.
I say is there supposed to be?
Yeah, you got to. Oh, you do have a space. Yeah, you're right. There you go. Okay. Yep. Okay, now we're going to really switch it up here quickly. So let's do this. We're going to just stick right on that code you're at. We're going to redo it now with the in class. And the in class that we're going to do, I'm going to forward fast on the PDF file here for time's sake. I do want to mention, if you want to put a comment in your code, just like C++, that's a comment line. So if I wanted to put a comment in my code here in PHP, I would do it here. So say if I put my code here and I wanted to put a comment and save it, when I go to my web browser, you don't see the comment. Okay? Now if you view the source, the comment also is going to be hidden because it's actually a PHP code. So that's a comment, so I'll highlight that. Echo command just echoes out to the screen. We will not use print command this semester. That's old school PHP. And some of your new PHP does not render it correctly. So we will be using echo command anytime you echo anything to the screen. We'll get more into next week on single quotes and double quotes. I do want to mention variables. The $ in variables is what you use to declare a variable. And so working with the code that we have right here, if you guys will break yours up to kind of look like mine, all right, putting your echo command on a separate line. So you got PHP, your echo command on line 7, and your end PHP on line 8. If I make a new line on line 7 and I go ahead and put in here a variable name, I'm going to call it name. I'll call it str name equals Chuck. And I echo out that same declaration, okay, that same declaration on the echo command. It should display Chuck now. I didn't save it right, probably. Str name, echo str name space. There we go. needed double quotes instead of single quotes on my, since it's a string. And so if you put in there what I just put in on yours and replace Chuck with your name, you should get the same results, okay? Make sure and don't do what I did and put single quotes instead of double quotes. Make sure and put double quotes around it since it is a string. Otherwise, you will get nothing when it comes over. So now I want to jump to the meat of what we're doing here, which is the dog years. All right, so let me go to my dog years app. In fact, if I go to Web290, and I'll download my file here real quick. Give me a second. Yeah, I'm gonna put the code on the overhead. So give me a second. I'll put it on the overhead for you. So let me download this very quickly, and then we'll get to it. I've already got it on mine, so I don't need to. My archive utility has been giving me fits here. So I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to bring up the code for week 2 lab, and then you guys are going to copy it into your development code. All right, I'll blow this up so we can see it, so give me a second. And you're just going to put in what I have here, so let me blow this up for you. Too big. All right, can everybody see that? Can you see that okay? Okay, so while you're typing this in, just know on lines 7 and 8 and 9, we're declaring some variables. And we talked a little bit last week. While you're typing this in, I'll talk about what you're typing in. 7, 8, and 9, type in exactly what you see on the overhead on your Notepad++. And you're just going to overwrite what we've already done here in that same file. So, yes?
My comment code comes up.
You what now?
My comment code, where is
You
it?
know, close it to being right, it's right after the body.
I did it after the body, I just changed it to see.
Did you the PHP then the codes? The two-
Comment
two-
code,
two-
I don't-
two-
You don't need that in there at all on line
No,
5.
but it didn't work the first time I saw it, that's all.
Just backspace and get rid of that whole line of code. You don't need it. There you go. All right. So on line 7, as you guys are typing in after your PHP declaration, 7, 8, and 9 are variables. And we talked last week how variables in PHP are different than any other language in that what's to the right of the variable name determines the whether it's a string or it's not a string, or whether it's an integer or not an integer. So the first one is name, and I've got in here Chuck Conkle, so it's going to be a string. Age is 43, and then the number 9, dog age, is age times 7, and then I'm going to echo out on each line. The first line is going to echo out name, second line is, third line the age for dog age, and then fourth line is in dog years, and then end PHP tag.
So numbers don't need quote marks?
Numbers do not need quote marks. If you put quote marks around it, it would be a string. okay? If you put quote marks around it, it would be a string. Now, I did tell you this earlier, and I'll correct it on mine. Technically, we'll want this for our purpose, this to be quotes, double quotes on the string Chuck Conkle, just to show up right on some of your browsers. So we'll keep with that. Single quotes are only used in echo commands, technically, echoing a string. But if you're declaring a string, make sure and use double quotes. I had single quotes on mine, it should be double quotes. So put your name, instead of Chuck Conkle, you're going to put your name, John Smith or whatever in there. Okay, cool.
Why can't you put this all in one, I guess, the echo all in one line?
Why couldn't you put the echo all on? Yeah, you'll learn how to do that. You will learn how to put the echo all in one line, not tonight. But what we'll do is you'll learn how to do what's called concatenate the strings, and you wouldn't have to do separate echo lines. Yep, you will definitely learn that. And it's just like HTML. The reason we have to do separate lines, even like if you did separate line in HTML, it will all show up on one line. Now, you could echo out on a separate line a BR tag to give a break in there, a P tag for a paragraph, whatever. But we will show you in weeks to come how to take these strings and concatenate them together, and it's not real difficult. In fact, you would use a dot operator in between to put those strings together. But for tonight's purpose and this week, we'll keep it simple. And I wanted to mainly show you with this in-class lab the declarations of variables. You do not have to define them as a type initially. The type is defined, but what's to the right of that preprocessor directive, which is the equal sign. Okay? So whatever's to the right of that preprocessor directive, which is the equal sign, determines the type of that variable. Does that make sense? That's why we can times together age times 7, because it sees age as an integer because of 43. All right? It sees name as a string because of Chuck Conkle. Does that make sense?
What'd you say to the right of the equal sign was what?
It's called a preprocessor directive. The equal sign is called a preprocessor directive. It's also called that in C++ as well. It's also called that in VB. And so you'll see some similarities in terminology if you've had other languages. If this is your very first language, you're fine. If you have just basic HTML, we start everything from scratch, so you're good. So preprocessor directive is the equal sign. Anytime you hear me say that, what's to the right of it declares it. Pretty simple, right? Once you got it working, so you can basically go crazy with variables. You know how to define variables. The one thing you need to make sure and understand is, as a beginning student, is the wrapper of the PHP tags. That's the biggest one, and there can be no spaces in between the lesser than symbol and the PHP, and between the question mark and the greater than symbol. No spaces. If you have a space, it won't render. We had that happen up here. We had a space up here we noticed at the very end. So, syntax, it's very syntax oriented. If you declare name with a capital N, you have to use capital N below with name. Okay? Make sense? So it's very syntax oriented. Okay, now I'm going to end with the PHP example, or the FTP example, of this file to your external host. Would you have a question?
Well, do you have to have the spaces before and after is? And
Well, that's just for aesthetics purposes.
Okay.
Otherwise, it'd be all shoved together.
Okay.
It'd be Chuck, no space, is, no space, dog, so yeah, that's just for aesthetic purposes for spacing. Okay, let's do this for time's sake. You tell me if you like this, okay. I'm going to show you on the overhead. I'll switch it over to Windows. Show you on the overhead how to FTP. I did a podcast of this already. Did anybody get a chance to see this podcast that I'm talking about? Do I know? Actually, let me show you where it's at. Let me show you where it's at, because it's the very same thing we're going to be doing in here. I have it in the course documents directory. And I believe in here I show you how to use, I use Windows, I believe, for the podcast, if I'm not mistaken. Let me pull it up real quick, and we'll just look at it that way. It'll be simpler. We'll go over together that way. We'll watch it together here. and I'll answer any questions you might have. So we'll go over this course documents. When we're through going over the podcast, it's in course documents, and it's on FTP. In fact, I have it at the end of every lesson as well. So if we go into week 2, at the very bottom, how to upload your local host to external, that's on every week. I have this link to this podcast. And this just goes to the external link, I believe, in YouTube. Let's just play it on this one. And I'll make it big screen and put the quality up.
Show you how to send your files.
I'm going to forward fast a little bit.
In a beetle degree. There's Web290. It's applications seen here on this website. It, so we'll say you're finished with each week's homework assignment. I told you.
Okay, so we'll pretend we're finished with week 2's homework assignment, okay? And which is right here, choosing a beetle to greet. Paul, John, George, and Ringo will show up on your PHP page. We'll pretend you're finished with that. And let me forward fast where it gets to the actual FTP information. Okay, boom, boom, boom. Right there.
So you log into your 00 web host like I've done here.
So the first thing is you log into your 00 web host, and I'll scroll down here in a second and show you how to get to your FTP information.
Here, go to cPanel, scroll down to your FTP information under Files, View FTP Details.
Okay, I'm going to stop there. When you get to this screen, it shows you your FTP information. What I would suggest is, the first time you go here, is go ahead and change your account password for your FTP immediately and write it down so you'll remember what it is. And again, it recommends in here using Smart FTP or FileZilla. I use Windows, and I'll show you what it means in just a second to do that.
Here's my FTP hostname, that's what you'll need.
So the FTP hostname for mine is web290.comoj.com. That's my username, and my password, I know what that is. I'm going to forward fast a little bit to the actual Windows. This is the important part right here.
This is my,
Okay, let's stop right there. What this is on the right side is you just bring up My Documents in Windows. Okay? You bring up your My Documents like you can do, or double-click on Computer. Type in the FTP address of your website that you just got from your 00 web host. There's mine, you'll notice. All you've got to remember is you type in FTP : 2 / FTP dot, and then whatever it was it gave you for that website address for your FTP, you paste that in. So mine is ftp.web290.comj.com. I type that in, I hit enter on my keyboard, and over here on the left side are the files I'm going to upload. This is a local computer. I'm going to upload them to my external here. So let's keep going here.
information from 00 web host. web290.comj.com. All you do is take that information, that address, you have to type in ftp dot whatever.
Went over all that already. I want to get to the prompt.
Computer folder to see this.
Now, I already logged into mine already earlier. You will not see a prompt
1j
for
dot
login. Okay, you will not see a prompt on the video for login, but you will get a prompt the very first time you do this at home on a Windows machine. You'll get a prompt. You'll log in with that username and password you got from your 00 web host control panel. It'll show you public HTML folder, and that's the folder you're going to double click on to get to the files. And so basically, this is what I tell students. Public HTML is the same externally as htdoc is locally. Okay, you understand that? Public HTML on 00 web host is the same on your external site as htdoc is locally. It's the root of your web server on your external site. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Okay. So let's keep going here. Try to get to where I'm actually copying stuff in just a second here.
Of your site, which in this case mine is Web290 within my H2 docs. That is the one, remember, that looks like this. So what I have on my local is this. So what I have on my local is also going to be on my...
I'm going to forward fast to the for you actually calculating files, moving files. So what I'm showing you on this video is
any existing...
I'm copying the entire contents in this example of my Web290 folder to the root of that public underscore HTML on 00 web host. That's what I'm doing for my example for the video podcast. All you guys will need to copy will be the contents of your projects folder, your homework folder, whatever you name it. All right, that will be what you'll copy over. So it'll be whatever the website they gave you on 00 web host / Web290, and then in that will be the contents of your project folder, which will just have your weeks. That's it. Weeks 1, weeks 2, weeks 3, weeks 4, so on and so forth. Does that make sense? So you should have public HTML. You should have public HTML on the external site. And what is public HTML like locally? htdocs. So public HTML will be the root of your external site like htdocs is locally. All right? That's number one. Number two, what you're going to do is the contents of htdocs, the only folder you'll ever be interested in copying over to the external site is going to be your homework folder or project folder, whatever it is that you've named it. The template I gave you, I believe, was projects, was it not? We'll just go with projects then. Projects. You won't copy projects over, you're copying the contents of projects over. So it'll be your week 1, week 2, week 3, or actually starting with week 2. Week 2, so on and so forth. That you will copy into the public HTML. Okay? So when you browse out to your website, we'll say your website is 123.com, which is not, / you will type in, just need to type in basically your, well, I forgot one path. Beyond project, before projects, I want to put in Web290. You could put that in there too if you wanted to, but you don't have to. You could actually just do public HTML week by week, and then at the bottom of that directory, if you're using 00 web host as your only web host, because some of you might be using Wix.com possibly as the interface, like the main interface of your website, the homepage. I saw that some of you were doing that, which is fine. If you're doing that, you'll just need your folders in the root of public HTML. That's it. Your folders, and that's it, week 2 through week 13. You won't need an index because on Wix.com, you're just going to point to that week's folder that shows your content of that homework. That's it. Okay? And I'll show you an example of one in just a second. A good example of a student last semester that did one that I really like using Wix.com. So that's what gets through calculating and copying. It might take a while depending. Windows lies to you, by the way. It'll say, like mine said 40 minutes, then a minute later it was down to 2 minutes. And that's it. It's copied the contents of the website, of your folders. Pretty simple on Windows. Now let me show you real quick, if I could, an example of what your page could look like and what I'd like it to look like. It doesn't have to look just like this or be as fancy as this, but definitely if we go into week 1, which we went over last week, and the getting started, there's a page here, I believe, on an example page. Here's the development structure we've already went over. Here's an example of Petro Labs, okay? This is his website through limewebs.com he created. These are pointing to directories, or could be pointing to directories on 00 web host and loading here on the right side, okay? But some of you already have Dreamweaver, you already know web development, how to build a web page, and so you can build your front-end web page just fine using that, and then point to those folders and have it all hosted on 00 web host, or you could use Wix.com to do it, and I believe there was actually a link inside of 00 web host for Wix.com.
Yeah, that confused me.
Well, it's just a front-end database. It's just a front-end web page. I mean, it's a front end for your website, so you don't have to worry about, because Wix.com, if you haven't already looked at it, it's just a Flash-enabled site that you can build quickly a home page, okay, with your name at the top, directories on the left, weeks 1 through whatever, all the way to final. And what these links will link to would actually be the links, the folders in 00 web host. You could have it do it that way. Let me show you another example from some other students. I think I have some final examples here, and yeah, here we go, final website examples. We'll go to Kyle's here and look at his. And web page taking forever. Okay. Website's not loading.
Is Wix considered like a CMS or is that?
No, it's actually just a Flash-enabled site. So if we go to Wix.com, I can show you real quick. Wix.com is just a front-end builder for a web page. It's free, doesn't cost anything. So if you wanted to use this as a front end to a website to easily get one up, just to have all your lab links and everything in there, you could hyperlink those labs to the actual folder on 00 web host. Does that make sense? So Wix would be the front end, 00 web host would be the back end of your PHP data. All right? You don't have to do it that way. I believe last week I showed you the template for our class, which we downloaded, which I have mine. It looks like this right here on my external, looks just like here on my local. That template I downloaded that's in our week 1 is right here. And it goes to my lab folders week by week. Okay, to my homework folders week by week. This is week 2's, all right? And this template, by the way, you could actually use if you wanted to for the class. You don't have to use Wix.com if you don't want to. Just some students really like Wix.com. I'd say about half the students last semester liked it and wanted to use it, and I said they could use it, so you don't have to use it. Inside of week 1, when we went over the getting started, if you didn't already do this on your USB drive, there is a template to fill out or template to download in week 1 for Web290. Let's see here. I think it's in the lessons. There it is. There it is right there. And what that is, it's just a template for your website. And you can change it, tweak it. It's very simple. It's got navigation in it and everything already. You don't have to use that though. And then you could actually use that for your local host and your external both if you wanted to. Okay. Now, can you upload your labs to your external host if you want to? You can do that. They're just not going to be graded, so you don't have to. But if you wanted to, you could. All right. I had about half the students last semester uploaded both their labs and their homework because it was easier, because all they did was basically dragged over that Web290 folder on their local host over to their 00 web host, and they were done. Okay, that's all they had to do each week. If you want to do that, that's fine. Okay, I won't be grading your labs, but you can definitely do that. Does that make sense? And so if you wanted to do that, that would be great. And so that was a real quick, and the video we just watched is in the root of course documents on how to FTP. It's also at the end of every week how to upload your local host to your external site. Every week there's a link at the bottom. It's already there for you. So definitely what I would say, since you don't have much, what you have to do this week is fairly simple on week 2. And let me break it down for you. I want to go over the take home for this week for you, and then we'll be done. If you need to hang back and work on stuff, we have till 10, so we're not going to rush you out of here. For your homework, okay, your homework structure could be the actual homework folder, it could be projects, whatever you want to call it. And then the external site is going to be that public HTML. Week 2 is what my example is. The reading is here, and you're going to read this portion, 2.6 through 2.10, and 3.1 through 3.12. The exercise is read and complete the exercise from the below URL where you see exercise passing variables on a URL. Let me go ahead and click on that to show you. And we're looking for exercise passing variables on the URL. So there is some reading to do on this one as you keep going down. Passing variables on the URL, right there. Here, it gives an example here of 3 greetings, one for hello, one for hi, and one for howdy. Okay, that's the code example, complete code example for you. And so you've got 2 files. You've got a hello hi.html and a hello hi.php. Okay. When you're finished with both of these files, they'll be in the same folder. So it'd be in the week 2 folder. And what it's going to end up looking like is, if I click on this example link, I've got Ringo and John on mine, I believe. So I've got Paul, John, George, and Ringo. What you guys are doing for yours, and you can keep it the same name as is in the tutorial, or you can change it up if you want to, like I did. Okay, it doesn't have to be exactly like the homework says. If you want to add in other, besides these 3, you can do that. Right now for the homework, what you have to get an A on this is exactly what you have in these lines of code right here for hello hi.html and hello hi.php. They're both in the same directory, and so when the user browses out to hello hi.html, they're going to see this. They'll see 3 instances. It'll actually be what? Hello, hi, and howdy is what it'll look like. When you click on each one of these, this says choose a beetle on mine to greet. If I click on Paul, it says hello, Paul. Because this whole lesson is on passing a reference variable. You'll notice here on this, I've got hello who.php. It's passing the beetle reference. In this case, it's Paul, and that's how it gets Paul here. Because in the variable reference, it's being coded. Here in the PHP, it's doing what's called, and you'll read about it in your reading, a get command. The get command is grabbing the greet here past the HTML or past the question mark. So greet equals, greet equals, greet equals. You got hello, hi, and howdy. It's going to put that into greeting. So if they click on hello, greeting is going to become hello. If they click on hi, greeting is going to become hi. If they click on howdy, greeting is going to become howdy as a variable, okay, as a variable content. Then when it's used down here, it's basically going to put it in the title of the HTML, and it's also going to put it in the echo command of the body of the web page. So it's just like in mine, I've got hello Paul, I've got hello George, hello Ringo. Code-wise, let me show you that. And by the way, everything I'm just showing you is already on the podcast for week 2. Okay? If you haven't already seen it, it's already there. So let me go to projects, week 2. I named mine index.php and hello-who.php. There's my index. Let me blow this up for you so you can see it. And the next one is hello-who.php. Blow that one up. It's the same. Okay, so let's look at the first one. Pretty simple. Disregard this up here because this is just for my local development. This isn't in your homework assignment. This is just for me to have my navigation. So it's actually from lines 4 down. So I've got my basic HTML code, choosing a Beetle. Here, though, what I'm doing is going to hello.php page. You guys have seen that already in HTML, going to a website. The difference in PHP is to pass a variable, all you need to do is put a question mark, the variable name you want it to be called, and then to the right of the equal sign, the variable value. So in this case, we're passing Beetle 4 times, or 1 time each, by the time they click on it. And they click on Beetle, this line's going to be Paul. Beetle, this line's going to be John. Beetle, George, or Beetle, Ringo. When it goes to hello.who, which is the page it's going to here, hello-who.php, look here. All it's doing is, the very first 3 lines of code is capturing the URL with the get command. The get command in PHP, this $_get, captures the content of what's in the URL for Beetle. It's actually capturing that content past the question mark. So here it's going to be either the 4 Beetle, one of the 4 Beetles is going to be plugged into Beetle. So it's either going to be what? Paul, John, George, or Ringo that'll be plugged into it. Hello. In the title, you'll notice an embedded PHP tag. You're all familiar with title tags in HTML. Nothing different here, unless instead we're embedding a PHP tag here. And notice we're using the contents of the variable that was brought over. So it'll be hello, George, Ringo, John, so on and so forth. And then down here, also using it to declare that Beetle in the body of the HTML. So when you see the page, it looks like this. This is an HTML. This is actually a PHP page, index.php. And they click on Paul. It goes to the exact URL here, hello.php. That's the name of the page I'm going to. Question mark, it's passing a variable, and that variable is going to be Paul. Okay? It's not really that difficult. Once you read it and go over this example, you'll get it, no problem. I do have the source code here already in week 2. I believe the source code is using my Beatles example. And again, you don't have to be, if you're a stickler to homework, step-by-steps, you can do exactly what it has here. You'll end up having 2 files, one called hellohi.html, one called hellohi.php. They'll be in the week 2 folder of your homework, okay, or your projects, whatever you want to call it. When you run this, you want to make sure and run the HTML file first. The HTML file will show you the links to hello, hi, and howdy. And then when you click on those links, it'll pass it to this hello, hi.php, which will give you what I just showed you earlier with the Beatles example. All right? And all we're doing here is passing a variable reference in the actual URL. Now, is that safe to do for passwords and usernames? No, but it's okay to do for this example here. And in PHP, one of the benefits of passing variables from page to page like this is to keep like your username. When you log into a website and authenticate, and you want to say, you want to capture the username from page to page to page of that website, this is done a lot in PHP, and you'll see that in a lot of websites. You'll see your actual name or ID or something in the actual URL itself. But you'll also learn this semester how you can pass what's called session variables, which are hidden from the URL, but they're actually kept in the memory of the server from page to page to page to page. And that would be like security stuff like your username that you maybe don't want people to see, your student ID, things of that nature, okay? And so for this example here, we're just actually passing variables using PHP. So questions on that? If you have any, rewatch the podcast in week 2. I go over it from beginning to end in detail. It's like a 50-minute podcast. And I believe I told you this last week. If you're not already doing it, make sure and watch the podcast prior to coming to class each Wednesday. So next week is week 3. Before you come to class, watch the entire podcast. And I mentioned to you last week, I'll mention it again, and I won't mention it again after this. These podcasts I created for the most part last semester and updated them. So they're going to be dated. You might see some, it'll say fall 2012 on the podcast because we're literally in fall 2012 when I created it. But the content's the same. So I'm not going to recreate the podcast for this semester. It's the same content. So what's great about that for you guys is you can literally watch, which I know some of you probably already done, podcasts all the way up through week 6 now or whatever. You've already done it. Okay? And that's just going to help you that much more having those podcasts already in there for you. And what I tell students is if you get stuck on something, pause the podcast, go and rewind it back to over that area I went over, because sometimes I do talk fast, I know, and you can rewind it and then play it over again, okay? But none of these assignments you'll be in the dark in, because you have not only your reading to go over, the podcast to go over that gives you line by line the source code, you also have the source code itself to download in a zip format at the end of each homework that you can look at to see if you do have issues. And I guarantee you the issues you guys are going to have right at the get-go, and I saw as I was walking around, is mainly going to be syntax related. You're going to forget a semicolon on the end of a line. That's an easy one. You're going to forget that. You're going to put a space in between your PHP declarations. So you're going to put a space in between your question mark and PHP. You'll do that, okay? Those are things you're going to do. So will you get frustrated? Yes, you will. I'll go and tell you that. But don't quit. Don't give up. Just take a break, come back, or better yet, if you have class here throughout the week, you can ask somebody to look at your code. You can email me your code. I'll look at it. And I'll tell you, I'll put a little comment. If it's a syntax thing, I'll put a little comment in your code and say if I find it, if it's a syntax related thing, I'll just put a comment in your code that says, you might check your syntax after this very line. And you'll go, oh, like that. And so, but you'll get it, so don't worry about it. Yes? Do what now? No, you will not use that at all in PHP. PHP, it is tricky, okay? We're using Notepad++ for Windows users, and then we're using Text Wrangler for Mac users. It's very syntax oriented. So one of the headaches, and I'm glad you mentioned that, one of the headaches you will have as well is syntax with variable names that you create. And if you just keep the rule I mentioned earlier tonight, which is keep everything lowercase, even in your variable names, you're good to go. You're golden, all right? But if you start capsing, like in VB, a lot of times we'll do what's called bookcase variable names. So if it's first name, all caps the F and the N in the variable, don't do that in PHP. It'll be a nightmare for you. If it's a first name variable, it's first name lowercase, everything. It'll be much simpler for you, all right? And if you need help, again, I'm online at chat. Some of you have already done that already in here. On our course site, right in the main course site here. In the main site, right here, if you didn't already know it, there is an online chat. And if I'm available, which I've had 2 of you already use it this past week at like 10 o'clock at night, and it's actually over in this area here, just go ahead and put your name in there. I can chat with you. You can give me code segments, which a student here did. I helped him with it. And so I don't mind doing that. One thing I do want you to do just to help me time-wise is make sure you've went over your code line by line for syntax issues. If you can't find them and you've went over it and you're like, I don't know what's going on here, something's wrong, contact me. Let me know what's going on. I'll help you with it. If I'm not available on live chat, email me. If you've not already emailed me already in other classes, I do respond pretty quickly to emails, and so I'll get back to you as soon as possible. The homework for here is not actually due until the following Wednesday. So even though this is week 2, it's not due Sunday like a lot of my classes. It's not this week 2 stuff is not due until next week. And the only thing you actually have due is what I just went over here, which is in the homework section for week 2, because the lab we went over together, and the homework section you still have to go over on your own through watching a podcast, doing your reading, and doing the exercise on the passing variables on the URL. And just to make sure you understand, you can tweak the exercises to fit something different than what you want. I don't care. All right? If you want to add other menu or add other links in there besides what they have on the page, that's fine, like I did for the Beatles. You can do that, okay? You can be creative with it and have fun with it, because when you make it your own, you're going to have more fun with it, you're going to learn more, and it's going to stick in your memory better, okay? Believe me, it will. Any questions? Okay, well, we're done with week 2. If you have any questions, you can hang back or come up here and see me. You guys did a great job helping each other tonight. Make sure before you leave, if you are leaving, to do this for me. Make sure that you stop your XAMPP environment. You got to stop MySQL and Apache both. Stop both of them. After you've done that, shut every window down you have on your Windows environment, and also do me a favor and shut Windows down itself. And also remember to take your USB thumb drive with you and don't leave it in here, because when we leave, the door's locked and you'd have to get security to help you get in here or come tomorrow and get it. So, but if you do need help with anything, hang back. I'll help you. Otherwise, you guys did great tonight. See you next week. Yep. Be right there. Let me end this real quick. Let me end this, guys. I'll be right with you. Da, 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 da.